The Silent Hill rumour mill has been anything but silent in the last few years, and while my hopes have been built up numerous times throughout only to lead to disappointment, I do truly feel we are close to a worldwide relaunch of the Silent Hill franchise with a confirmed movie in the works and potentially several games. There's so many leaks out there at the moment, it's hard to keep track on what's credible and what isn't. Today, however, I want to discuss what Silent Hill has to do in the 2020s to not only please the die-hard fans, but also stand on its own two legs for newcomers to become entranced by the world and lore of the games we all remember and love so much. I'm going to assume by clicking on this video you're already familiar about the game's story, and I won't waste your time by going over things you already know too much. A new story. As we know, the base story of Silent Hill revolves around a pseudo-religious cult attempting to birth a deity or god that they all worship. There are exceptions to this rule. Silent Hill 2 exists on its own by distancing itself from the cult idea and tells its own contained story. A story which gave us a deep dive into depression, anxiety, paranoia, abuse, and violence. This is the angle I believe the franchise needs to take to be able to always adapt with the times, for the plot to never get tired. I know the Silent Hill purists will probably argue that it wouldn't be Silent Hill without the cult being present, but I personally feel that times have changed, and while in the 90s the scare of a crazed religious cult was relevant, I don't think that this can continue to unsettle people like it did back then. The more psychological horror that James went through in Silent Hill 2 still holds water today.
So there you are, James. Did you get the letter? Did you find Mary? If not, let's get going already, okay?
Laura. Mary's gone. She's dead.
Sure, the voice acting might not be up to the same caliber of modern games or films, although I still find it does have its own unique charm, but the themes covered in that game resonated with a lot of people across the globe then and still do today. The writers and the developers weren't shackled with having to tie everything to the cult with a nice branded ribbon, and that gave them the freedom to fully explore their ideas. What resulted from that was nothing short of a masterpiece in the survival horror genre and the gaming medium in general. And if a new Silent Hill is close to being revealed, I think it needs to take an original story, just like Silent Hill 2 did. Tell a deep and harrowing tale about an individual's personal horror and journey us through it, keeping that dreamlike confusion with the lure of intrigue that keeps us on the edge of our seats while we search to uncover the mysteries that surround us. This is just my opinion, of course, but with this approach, the games could always stay current with the times and not become synonymous with out-of-date horror tropes and cliches. The setting. Although a few of the games have taken place outside of Silent Hill, for the first new mainline title, I believe we should definitely spend the majority of the game in the town itself. Let us see what the past 18 years of video game graphical improvements have to say about our beloved town, and let newcomers have their first extensive visit. The problem with this, however, would be how familiar fans are with the map of the town already. After a couple of hours of retreading old ground, albeit after a facelift, would the novelty wear off and the players get bored? I think maybe using the story to change the town in some way. Maybe the manifestation of the main character's personal demons doesn't just create monsters, but change sections of the town or create new areas altogether. That being said, there are still plenty of places in the town that we never got to see the insides of, and these could be fully fleshed out and give us new insights to the streets and places we thought we knew so well. After the reboot though, providing it's successful and more games follow it, we could see some more stories that spend some more time in other places, especially if the psychological route is where the focus is. We all carry around our own personal torment and nightmares after all. Characters. Silent Hill has given us a wide array of characters already, ranging from the deeply troubled.
Oh, it's you.
To the intentionally wacky.
I find it most fascinating.
If a new game wants to be taken seriously though, I think it needs to hone in on something relatable. The Silent Hill formula tends to lean towards the everyman approach with its lead role. A character who is normal and isn't remarkable in any way. They're not the action hero type of character that games such as Resident Evil deliver us. They are someone whose shoes we can walk in and feel the sense that we are underpowered and against the odds. This is extremely important in my opinion. It's what lends to so many other aspects in the game, such as their inability to effectively fight with any sort of prior combat knowledge, and whose inner psyche isn't bulletproof, but rather reminds us how fragile our own sanity really is. So our lead role needs to be relevant to people in the modern day. The 90s and the 2000s were a very long time ago at this point, and the writers need to know that and adapt appropriately. After all, there is a lot of new modern day depression and anxiety that has come as a price of things such as social media and smartphones. Everyone wants to appear as something they are not, and there's plenty of horror stories to be told with the desperation of people seeking validity. That's just an example, but there are plenty of modern day struggles that people can relate to, which would make for great Silent Hill plots, especially if they wouldn't have to revolve around the cult idea. As for the other characters who we would meet during the course of the game, I think Silent Hill 2 again is a great reference point to look back on. Characters like Angela,
You make me sick.
and Eddie,
Well, maybe he was right. Maybe I am nothing but a fat, disgusting piece of shit. But you know what? It doesn't matter if you're smart, dumb, ugly, pretty. It's all the same once you're dead.
were perfect supporting cast to meet on our journey. Both seemed unhinged for different reasons. It felt like the town was luring people from all walks of life who had to face the things they were running from come to life and haunt them until they were forced to deal with them. Everyone in that game felt like they were all seeking closure for something that they had been through in their past. They were characters who, while we as players knew weren't monsters, we still didn't want to spend any more time than we needed to around them, which goes against the survival instinct of strength in numbers. But we knew we couldn't feel fully safe around them. So, as interesting as it was when your paths crossed, you knew your journey you had to face alone. This is just great writing, and it makes each encounter with these troubled individuals continue that dreamlike feel, whether it's the spacing and phrasing of their spoken words, or how little sense some of the things they say seem to have, only to be pieced together throughout the course of the game to where you start to understand they're not much different from the character you play as.
It's hot as hell in here.
You see it too. For me, it's always like this.
Enemy characters and monsters. Silent Hill wouldn't be Silent Hill without manifestations or monsters. We will obviously need this theme to continue, as it's at the heart of the franchise. Players love to decipher the meanings behind the monster designs and how they are all symbolic in some way, shape or form to the plot. When we look at monsters from the past in Silent Hill games, everyone has their favourites, but one thing is for sure, which I hope we can all agree on. Pyramid Head, as cool as he was, needs to be somewhat forgotten. He was an extremely thought-provoking, iconic and memorable monster, but he doesn't belong in any other game but Silent Hill 2. Being the manifestation of James's guilt, there is no reason other than that he's become somewhat a flagship creature to feature him in any of the new games. The nemesis or stalker type of enemy has been done so many times at this point in many different games, it begs the question, do we need one to knock Pyramid Head off his throne? Or can the game have good enough pacing and a variety of enemies that we don't need one at all? There are leaks of a cherry blossom looking creature made from post-it notes lurking down a claustrophobic corridor signed by Masahiro Ito himself, the monster designer for the first 3 Silent Hill games, which apparently are concept drawings from a Silent Hill project that is in development. I think this is a really cool idea, and with the right tone, if the pretty pale pink cherry blossom aesthetic is juxtaposed with the impending doom of Silent Hill's atmosphere, that kind of cognitive dissonance is the perfect breeding ground for a horror that stays in your head long after the credits roll or when you switch the game off. Whichever route these new games may go in, I think Pyramid Head should definitely be left in the past. The regular and smaller enemies can't really be theorized here in detail without knowing the plot of the game, but I do have faith in Ito-san's work provided he's still indeed involved in the project. Camera angle. Silent Hill came from an era where fixed cameras and tank controls were commonplace. The fixed cameras made for some of Silent Hill's cinematic tension building and atmosphere, whereas tank controls are largely voted as a dated movement mechanic. However, I do think these should be preserved for a reboot. Developers Supermassive Games have shown us a glimpse of what a modern fixed camera game looks like, and although I never really gelled with any of their games besides potentially Until Dawn, I really appreciated their choice of static camera sections, which I found to be really effective at setting the tone and mood. I would love to see these ideas explored again with modern day hardware for Silent Hill. It gives the artist so much more to play with, and it's ingrained in the series in my opinion. As for those tank controls, I would like there to be an option. much like there is in Silent Hill 2 to play with tank controls for the oldies who may want to experience the game that way, and a choice for a more modernised design for character movement. Just giving the player that option on how they would like to experience the game is important in my opinion. Remember, we're trying to appeal to old fans and new. Besides Silent Hill 4's room sections, the games have all been third-person experiences. I believe Silent Hill should remain third-person. I know, PT had the entire world at its mercy, and many games have gone to try and harness that first-person walking sim horror that PT teased. But like I said, it's been done before, and the only reason PT was in first person was to cleverly hide who the character was that you were playing as. That of course being revealed to be Norman Reedus at the end. I would like to think that Kojima himself would have made Silent Hills a third-person game if it didn't get cancelled, but of course we won't know the answer to that question, possibly ever. It was also very clear that Hideo Kojima really took a shine to Silent Hill 4 by using that photorealistic art style in first person for PT, and from the concept trailer there were similarities to Silent Hill 4 in the creature design. The combat. Silent Hill has always featured combat. It's never been the most robust of combat mechanically, and that is as much an intentional choice as to strip the player of confidence going into fights as it was the limitations of the hardware or game design of its era. Whether it was awkwardly swinging a melee weapon or trying to line up shots with firearms, the game's always had systems in place to let you desperately fight your way through the stories. The question is, however, how to modernise the combat systems to make the game feel good to play while simultaneously not giving you too much sense of power, which would ruin the atmosphere and completely negate any attempt to build tension. If fixed cameras are to be kept, it means we cannot have an over-the-shoulder camera to aim firearms with. Would this mean that the best route is to make the combat mainly melee-based? As it's a lot easier to aim your melee swings than it would be to precisely aim where we want without a visual aid, like a red laser sight for example. Surely then it would work with some sort of light lock-on system like the first 4 games. Would that be fulfilling enough for a modern audience though? This is surely a battle in itself in terms of development. What do you think the best way to tackle this is? Provided of course we are going with the fixed cameras approach. I personally wouldn't mind the light lock-on system like the older games, but then I know a younger audience who never experienced those older style of games would likely find it clunky and unenjoyable. Boss battles have also been another staple in the series, none of them being particularly well executed and usually revolve around you dumping a bunch of ammo into a bullet sponge enemy until a cutscene triggers the end of the fight. It is always a nice dopamine hit when you would take one of these guys down, but looking back on it with an objective mind, they were far from the best boss battles in any video games. I would like boss battles to still remain, but surely they can be innovated, and I would like to think with modern games setting the bar, we could find ourselves in some interesting boss battles which were slightly more involved than unloading all your ammo and healing between taking hits. Whatever the outcome, the game needs combat. It's just a question of how it would work without ruining the other gameplay and thematic elements. Music and sound. I think it goes without saying that Akira Yamaoka is the only man capable of delivering us the authentic Silent Hill soundscape. His work is undeniably important to all of the games in the series that he's worked on, from the anxiety-inducing, deep, guttural, industrial churning noises to his smooth guitar-driven rock numbers. Yamaoka-san is the Silent Hill artist in audible form and needs to be on board with any new Silent Hill project in my opinion. Akira Yamaoka is all that needs to be said about the soundscape of a new Silent Hill game. The general gameplay. Silent Hill, at least for the first 4 mainline titles at their core, were basically story-driven puzzle games with some combat between sections. This is always a dividing topic. Some people believe the puzzles were annoying and only there to increase the total runtime of the game, as they were designed to stall your progress until you figure out the answers, and others believe that they were immersive, engaging, and loved racking their brains to try and solve them. I think a new Silent Hill game should definitely feature puzzles, and well-designed puzzles at that, keeping with their theme of dreamlike surrealism with puzzle items and solutions. The early Silent Hill games let you choose the difficulty of combat and also of the puzzles as 2 separate difficulty settings. I love this idea, as players can then tailor their experience to suit them. This should definitely feature with a new game and have the puzzle difficulties thoroughly tested, to make sure they aren't just obnoxiously hard for the sake of them being impossible to solve without a guide on the higher difficulties. But also reward players somehow who pick the harder puzzle difficulties with something like unlockable outfits or weapons after a playthrough. I miss games doing that, and it's also nice to have the replayability options. Also, the puzzles could have varying answers to avoid people just looking them up online, but rather making them have to understand how to get to the answer so that they can feel clever for solving them. You gotta get that organic dopamine. If the game ditched puzzles altogether, it would become an action horror game, which I strongly feel is not the route to go down. In conclusion, I think a Silent Hill global relaunch of the series is completely on the cards. The reason it's taken so long comes down to many things, which by now I'm sure we're all very aware of. I love Silent Hill so much, and it's one of the games that had a huge impact on me growing up. I only wish the best for the future of its name, and so this video was just my thoughts on what Silent Hill needs to figure out so that it can once again stand toe to toe with the likes of Capcom's Resident Evil, which ironically was the very name which drove Konami to wish to develop a survival horror game to begin with. There are a lot of hungry old fans of Silent Hill and a lot of potential newcomers who can discover it for their first time. Konami and anyone involved, please do right by this prestigious name that you've kept hidden away for so long. Don't let it just become another distant memory in our restless dreams. If you've made it this far, guys, thank you so much. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I would love to hear your thoughts on Silent Hill in the comments. Do you agree or disagree with anything I said in this video today? If you liked the video, you know what to do with that thumbs up button. If you didn't like it, hit the thumbs down, and I'll see any and all of you in the comments.